The stars outside Valora Station burned cold and distant, like eyes that watched but did not care. Commander Salith Vor stood at the observation window of the command center, her four slender arms folded behind her back. Her silver-scaled skin caught the pale light of the nearby sun, and her large dark eyes reflected the endless void beyond the glass. Valora Station was her home. It was home to 42,000 souls from dozens of different species. Veloxy healers like herself worked in the medical wings, treating the sick and wounded from across the Helix corridor. Cathari scientists studied the mysteries of the universe in their laboratories. Droon merchants traded goods from 100 worlds in the busy market halls. Children of every species played together in the recreation areas, their laughter echoing through metal corridors. It was a place of peace, a place of healing, a place that had never known war. That was about to change. The first warning came from a fleeing convoy. 3 battered trading ships dropped out of subspace near the station, their hulls scorched and their engines failing. Salith watched the emergency crews rush to help them dock, her stomach tight with worry. The convoy captain, a scarred old Droon with one missing eye, had only managed to say 4 words before collapsing from his wounds. "The Raveks are coming." Salith had heard stories of the Raveks Dominion. Everyone in this part of the galaxy had heard stories. They were a predatory empire that existed on the edge of civilized space. They did not trade. They did not negotiate. They took what they wanted. And what they wanted most was slaves. Entire colonies had vanished into their territory, never to be seen again. The lucky ones died in the raids. The unlucky ones lived. She hoped the old captain was wrong. She hoped it was just pirates or raiders or anything else. But deep in her hearts, she knew the truth before the sensors confirmed it. 9 ships emerged from subspace in perfect formation. They were ugly things, built for war and nothing else. Their hulls were painted the color of dried blood, and their weapon ports glowed with hungry light. The largest ship, a massive command vessel covered in trophy bones and captured flags, moved to the center of the formation like a predator taking its place at the head of a pack. Salith stared at the tactical display, her 4 hands trembling slightly. 9 warships. Valora Station had 2 patrol cutters designed to chase away smugglers and rescue stranded travelers. Their shields were old. Their weapons were meant for asteroid mining, not combat. They had no army, no marines, no soldiers of any kind. They had nothing. The communication system crackled to life, and a voice filled the command center. It was deep and harsh, like stones grinding together. It spoke in the common trade language, but there was no warmth in the words. "I am Tyreth the Hollow, voice of the Raveks Dominion. You will surrender your station and all inhabitants for processing. You have 1 cycle to comply. Resistance will result in annihilation. This is not a negotiation." The channel closed. The command center was silent. Salith looked around at her staff. She saw fear in every face. The young Cathari communications officer had stopped breathing. The Droon security chief was gripping his console so hard his knuckles had turned white. Even the old Veloxy medic who had survived 3 station emergencies looked pale. "Send a distress call," Salith said. Her voice was steady, though she did not feel steady inside. "Send it to everyone. The Galactic Concord, the Cathari Collective, the Droon Merchant Guilds, anyone who can hear us. Tell them what is happening. Tell them we need help." The communications officer nodded and began working his console with shaking hands. Messages flew out into the void at the speed of light, crying for help to a galaxy that might not care. Salith walked to her command chair and sat down. She pulled up the station's defense systems on her console and felt her hopes sink even lower. The shields were at 70% capacity. The power grid was old and patched together. The 2 patrol cutters had a combined total of 4 small plasma cannons between them. Against 9 warships, they might as well throw rocks, but she had to try. She had 42,000 people depending on her. "All security teams, begin evacuation procedures," she ordered. "Move civilians to the intersections. Seal all outer bulkheads. Engineering, I want every bit of power you can spare diverted to the shields. Communications, keep sending that distress call until someone answers." The station came alive with movement. Families grabbed what they could and hurried through corridors that suddenly felt like tunnels leading deeper into a trap. Parents carried crying children. The elderly were helped by the young. The sick were moved from the medical wings on floating stretchers, their IV lines trailing behind them like thin umbilical cords. Salith watched the chaos on the internal cameras and felt her hearts break. These were peaceful people, scholars and merchants and healers. They had never held weapons. They had never trained for war. They had come to Valora Station because it was supposed to be safe, far from the conflicts that plagued other parts of the galaxy. The galaxy had lied to them. Hours passed. The Ravix fleet did not move. They hung in space like patient vultures, waiting for their prey to exhaust itself. Tyreth sent no more messages. He did not need to. The message was clear in the silence. Surrender or die. The responses to Salith's distress calls began to arrive, and each one was worse than the last. The Galactic Concord sent a formal acknowledgement of her message. They expressed concern and promised to dispatch a peacekeeping fleet immediately, but the nearest fleet was stationed in the Corbin system, 11 cycles away at maximum speed. 11 cycles. The Ravix would have taken them all in one. The Cathari Collective sent their regrets. They valued Valora Station and the important scientific work conducted there. However, they could not risk open conflict with the Ravix Dominion at this time. They would file a formal complaint with the Galactic Council and push for sanctions. Salith almost laughed at that. Sanctions against slavers who did not trade with civilized space anyway. The Droon Merchant Guild sent a message of sympathy and an offer of financial compensation for any survivors who managed to escape. They also noted that several insurance policies held by station residents might be void due to acts of war. Salith deleted that message without finishing it. Other responses trickled in. Some offered prayers. Some offered advice on negotiation tactics that might satisfy the Ravix. Some did not respond at all. The galaxy, it seemed, had decided that Valora Station was already dead. Salith sat alone in her office, away from the frightened eyes of her staff. She allowed herself a moment of despair. Tears ran down her silver scales, and her 4 hands pressed against her face. She had failed. She had failed everyone who trusted her, everyone who called this station home. Then another message arrived. It came from far away, from a frontier outpost at the edge of explored space. The signal was weak, almost lost in the background noise of the universe. Salith had to amplify it 3 times before she could read the text. It came from humans. Salith knew little about humans. They were newcomers to the galaxy, having achieved faster-than-light travel only 2 centuries ago. They were primitive by galactic standards, still using crude chemical rockets for some applications and building their ships from raw metal instead of grown composites. They were small and fragile compared to most species, with only 2 arms and soft skin that offered no protection. They were emotional creatures, driven by feelings rather than logic. Some species found humans amusing, others found them annoying, a few found them unsettling, though no one could quite explain why. They had never been tested in a real war, never faced a true threat from one of the galaxy's older powers. They were children playing at space travel, and most of the established civilizations expected them to eventually grow up or die out. The message from the human outpost contained only 3 words. "We are coming." Salith stared at the message for a long time. She felt nothing. Not hope, not relief, not even curiosity. What could humans do? They were weeks away at best, and even if they arrived in time, what did they have to offer? A few primitive ships with primitive weapons against 9 Ravix warships? It was meaningless. A kind gesture from a young species that did not understand how the galaxy worked. She deleted the message and returned to the command center. The first cycle passed. Tyreth's deadline arrived, and Salith did not surrender. She could not surrender her people to slavery, even if the alternative was death. At least in death, they would be free. The Ravix fleet began to move. They did not attack the station directly. That would have been too quick, too merciful. Instead, they began to dismantle Valora piece by piece, like predators playing with their food. The first target was the communication array. Precision strikes from 2 Ravix destroyers tore the main antenna apart, sending twisted metal spinning into the void. The distress calls stopped. The station was now deaf and mute, cut off from the rest of the galaxy. The second target was the docking bays. Missiles streaked across space and slammed into the external hangars, destroying the 2 patrol cutters before they could even launch. Escape pods that tried to flee were picked off one by one, their tiny engines flaring bright before going dark forever. Salith watched the names of the dead scroll across her console and forced herself to keep breathing. The third target was hope itself. Tyrith's voice returned to the speakers, broadcasted through the local emergency frequency that still functioned. His tone was almost friendly now, the way a hunter might speak to a trapped animal. "Your calls for help were heard," he said, "and ignored. The Concord is not coming. The Cathari are not coming. No one is coming. You are alone, Commander. You have always been alone. The galaxy does not fight for the weak. The galaxy does not die for strangers. This is the truth of the void, and you are learning it now." He let the silence stretch for a moment before continuing. "I am giving you one more chance. Open your doors. Walk out peacefully. My processing teams are efficient. The transition to your new lives will be quick. Fight us, and we will take you anyway, but we will make it hurt. Your choice." The channel closed again. Salith looked around the command center. Everyone was watching her, waiting for her decision. She saw resignation in some faces, terror in others. A few looked at her with something that might have been trust, though she could not imagine why they would trust her now. She thought of the human message, 3 words that meant nothing. "We are coming," a lie or a fantasy, or perhaps just the naive optimism of a species too young to know better. But it was all she had. "We do not surrender," Sayla said. Her voice was quiet but clear. "We are not cargo to be processed. We are not livestock to be sold. We are people, and we will die as people if we must. But we will not give ourselves to them." No one cheered, no one argued. They simply nodded and returned to their stations, preparing for the end. The Ravex assault began in earnest. Breach pods launched from the warships, crossing the space between the fleet and the station in seconds. They slammed into the outer hull with tremendous force, punching through the metal skin and vomiting armed soldiers into the corridors. The Ravex ground troops were nightmares made real. They stood nearly 3 meters tall, their bodies covered in natural chitin armor that could stop most small weapons. They carried neural lashes that caused pain beyond description, and plasma cleavers that could cut through bulkheads like paper. The station's security teams met them with whatever they had. Maintenance tools, fire extinguishers, bare hands. The defenders fought with courage and desperation, but courage was not enough against professional killers. The outer sections fell within the first hour. The middle sections followed soon after. Salith retreated with the survivors to the central core, the last defensible area of the station. They sealed every door, welded every hatch, and piled furniture against the entrances like primitive barricades. Wounded civilians lay on the floor, moaning softly. Children clung to their parents and cried. The air was thick with smoke and fear. In the distance, Salith could hear the Ravex cutting through the doors. The sound of plasma cleavers was unmistakable, a high-pitched whine followed by the hiss of melting metal. They were coming, and nothing could stop them. She found a quiet corner and recorded a final message on her personal device. It was addressed to her broodkin, her family back on the Veloxy homeworld. She told them she loved them. She told them she was sorry. She told them to remember her not as she would die, but as she had lived, trying to help others. When the recording was finished, she stored it in a small capsule and placed it in an emergency beacon, programmed to launch when the station's life support failed. Maybe someone would find it someday. Maybe her family would know what had happened to her. The cutting sounds grew closer. Salith stood up and walked to the center of the room where the last defenders were gathering. She would not hide. She would not beg. She would face the end with whatever dignity she had left. And then the lights flickered. At first, Salith thought it was damage to the power grid, but the flicker was not random. It pulsed in a pattern. 3 short flashes followed by 3 long ones, repeating over and over. Someone was manipulating the station systems, someone with access to the main computer. The tactical display on the wall, which had been dark since the communication array was destroyed, suddenly came back to life. It showed the space around Valora Station, the Ravex fleet, the debris of destroyed ships and escape pods. And something else. Something was emerging from subspace behind the Ravex fleet. Not the smooth, controlled emergence of normal ships, but a violent tear in reality itself. Energy poured out of the rupture. Gravitational waves made the display flicker and jump. The Ravex ships, confused by the sudden phenomenon, began to turn their weapons toward the new arrival. A single ship emerged from the chaos. It was not beautiful. It was not elegant. It looked like it had been built by someone who had never heard of curves or grace. Its hull was angular and harsh, covered in scars and patches from countless battles. Weapons bristled from every surface, crude but numerous. The ship was painted black, and across its bow, in stark white letters that seemed to glow against the darkness, were two words: "We remember." Salith stared at the display. She did not understand what she was seeing. One ship, one small ship against 9 warships. It was suicide. It was madness. Then the ship began to broadcast. The sound came through every speaker on the station, every remaining system that could carry audio. It was not a message. It was not words. It was music. Human music. Drums that pounded like heartbeats. Strings that screamed like rage. A voice that roared in defiance against the darkness. The human ship was howling, and it was charging directly at the Ravex fleet. Salith watched, unable to move, unable to breathe. The Ravex commander was shouting orders. His 9 warships were turning their weapons on the lone attacker. It was impossible. It was insane. No one would do this. No one would throw themselves at an enemy fleet for strangers they had never met. But the humans were doing it anyway. The ship did not slow down. It did not try to hide or maneuver. It accelerated, pushing its engines beyond what should have been possible, and opened fire. The void lit up with weapons fire, and for the first time since the siege began, Salith felt something she had forgotten she could feel. Hope. The hours before the human ship arrived were the longest of Commander Salith Vor's life. They stretched like years, each minute heavy with fear and suffering. Later, she would call it the long night, though the station's artificial lights never truly dimmed. The darkness was inside them, not outside. After the communication array fell and the docking bays burned, the Ravex had settled into a patient rhythm of terror. They did not hurry. They did not need to. Valora Station was trapped, wounded, and alone. The predators could take their time. Salith moved through the station's corridors, trying to bring calm to her people. It was impossible, but she tried anyway. That was her duty. That was all she had left. The central sections of the station had become a refugee camp. Families huddled together in cargo bays and storage rooms, surrounded by whatever belongings they had managed to grab during the evacuation. Children sat with empty eyes, too shocked to cry anymore. The elderly prayed to gods that Salith suspected were not listening. The sick and wounded lay on makeshift beds, tended by exhausted Veloxi healers who had run out of medicine hours ago. In one corner of a crowded cargo bay, Salith found a young Droon merchant named Corveth. He was barely an adult by his species standards, with smooth gray skin and large eyes that still held some of the innocence of youth. He sat alone, away from the others, his arms wrapped around his knees. "Commander," he said when he saw her. His voice was small and tired. "Is anyone coming? Is anyone going to help us?" Salith looked at him. She thought of the responses she had received to her distress calls. The Concord that was too far away, the Cathari who refused to risk conflict, the Droon who offered only money. She thought of the human message, those 3 words that had meant nothing. "We are coming," a fantasy from a primitive species that would arrive too late to matter. She lied. "Yes," she said, "the Concord fleet is on its way. They will be here soon. You need to stay strong until then." Corveth nodded, and something that might have been hope flickered in his eyes. Salith felt sick. She was giving him false comfort, a lie to make the waiting easier. But what else could she do? Tell him the truth? Tell him that no one was coming? That the galaxy had abandoned them? That they were all going to die or worse? She moved on, leaving Corveth with his fragile hope. She had more lies to tell. The Ravex assault teams began their boarding operations shortly after. The breach pods had created dozens of entry points across the outer hull, and soldiers poured through like blood from a wound. Reports flooded the command center, each one worse than the last. Section 7 had fallen. The security team there had held for almost an hour before being overrun. 12 defenders dead, 30 civilians captured. Section 12 had fallen. A group of Cathari scientists had tried to seal themselves in their laboratory, but the Ravex had cut through the reinforced doors in minutes. The scientists were now in chains, being marched toward the breach pods. Section 4 had fallen. The defenders there had not even tried to fight. They had surrendered immediately, hoping for mercy. The Ravex had shown them none. Saleth listened to the reports and felt herself becoming numb. This was how the end came. Not in a single moment of destruction, but in a slow grinding down of hope, piece by piece, until nothing remained. The station's internal defenses were pitiful. A few security doors that could be locked, some emergency bulkheads that could be sealed, fire suppression systems that could be triggered to slow the attackers down. It was not enough. It was never going to be enough. The Ravex ground troops were terrifying to behold. Saleth watched them on the security cameras, moving through the corridors with mechanical efficiency. They stood nearly 3 meters tall, their bodies covered in natural chitin armor that ranged from dark brown to black. Their faces were hidden behind helmets that made them look like insects, with multiple eye lenses that glowed red in the dim emergency lighting. They carried weapons that Saleth had only heard about in horror stories. Neural lashes that could cause pain so intense that victims begged for death. Plasma cleavers that could cut through metal and flesh with equal ease. Capture nets made of wire so thin it was nearly invisible, but strong enough to hold a charging drone. The Ravex did not kill everyone they encountered. That would have been wasteful. Slaves were valuable, and they collected their cargo with practiced efficiency. Men, women, children, the elderly, the sick. Everyone had value to the Dominion. Everyone would be processed and sold. Saleth watched a group of civilians being herded toward a breach pod. They moved slowly, their heads down, their spirits broken. A young mother clutched her infant to her chest, trying to shield the baby from the cold eyes of their captors. An old Cathari scholar stumbled and fell, and a Ravex soldier kicked him until he got up again. She wanted to look away. She could not look away. A voice came over the internal communication system, broadcast from the Ravex command ship. It was Tyrath the Hollow, speaking with the calm satisfaction of a predator who had cornered his prey. "Commander Saleth Vor," he said. Her name sounded wrong in his mouth, twisted by his alien tongue. "I am told you are still hiding in your command center, still pretending that you can resist. I admire that. It is foolish, but I admire it." Saleth said nothing. The communication was one way. Tyrath was speaking to her, not with her. "Your people are already being loaded onto my ships," he continued. "Strong ones for the labor camps, intelligent ones for specialized work, young ones for training. We have uses for everyone, Commander, even the old and weak. They make good examples." He paused, and Saleth could almost hear him smiling. "Your galaxy has abandoned you. No one is coming. The Concord has written you off as an acceptable loss. The Cathari are too afraid to act. The Droon care only about profit. You are alone, Commander. You have always been alone. This is the truth of the void." The channel closed. Saleth stood in the command center, surrounded by her remaining staff. They looked at her with empty eyes, waiting for orders that she could not give. What was there to say? What was there to do? They were trapped, outnumbered, and outgunned. The enemy was cutting through their defenses like a hot blade through ice. She thought about surrender. She thought about opening the doors and walking out, offering herself in exchange for her people's lives. But she knew it would not work. The Ravex did not negotiate. They did not make deals. They took what they wanted, and mercy was not in their vocabulary. So she did the only thing she could do. She ordered the remaining defenders to fall back to the central core, the most protected section of the station. They would make their last stand there, in the heart of Valora, surrounded by the people they had sworn to protect. The retreat was chaos. Security teams carried wounded comrades through crowded corridors. Civilians screamed and pushed past each other, desperate to reach safety. The sound of plasma cleavers echoed through the halls, getting closer with every passing minute. Salith helped where she could. She carried children. She supported the injured. She held the hands of those who were too afraid to move and whispered lies about rescue and hope. All the while, the Raveks advanced, patient and relentless, a tide that could not be stopped. They reached the central core and sealed the doors. The engineers welded the hatches shut and piled furniture against the entrances. It would not hold for long, but it would hold for a little while. A little while was all they had. The central core was a large open space, designed for gatherings and celebrations. Now it was filled with terrified people, packed together like animals in a cage. The air was hot and thick with the smell of fear and sweat. Medical teams moved through the crowd, doing what they could for the wounded with supplies that had nearly run out. Salith found a quiet corner and sat down. She was exhausted beyond words. Her forearms felt like lead weights. Her mind was foggy with stress and lack of sleep. She wanted to close her eyes and pretend that none of this was happening. Instead, she took out her personal communication device and began recording a message. "This is Commander Salith Vor of Velora Station," she said. Her voice was steady, though she did not feel steady. "I am recording this message in case anyone finds it after we are gone. I want the galaxy to know what happened here. I want them to know that we asked for help and no one came." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "We sent distress calls to everyone we could reach. The Galactic Concord acknowledged our message and sent their regrets. The Cathari Collective refused to intervene. The Droon merchant guilds offered money, but no ships. Others simply did not respond. We were told that the nearest help was too far away. We were told that no one wanted to risk war with the Raveks. We were told to negotiate, to surrender, to accept our fate." Her voice cracked slightly, but she continued. "I want the galaxy to know that we did not surrender. We fought with everything we had, even though we knew we could not win. We fought because that was the only choice we had left. We fought because we refused to be cargo. We fought because we were people, not property." She took a breath. "Someone else sent us a message. Humans. They said they were coming. I do not know if they will arrive in time. I do not know if they can help, even if they do arrive. But I want to record this because it is the only message we received that offered more than sympathy. 3 words, we are coming. I deleted it because I did not believe it. I still do not believe it. But I want someone to know that at least one species tried." She stopped the recording and saved it to a small data capsule. She programmed the capsule to be ejected from the station when the life support failed, launched into space where maybe someday someone would find it. Maybe her family would learn what happened to her. Maybe the galaxy would feel some small moment of shame. It was a small hope, but it was all she had. The sound of plasma cleavers began again, closer now. The Raveks had reached the central core. They were cutting through the welded doors, slowly and methodically. The defenders gathered at the entrances, holding whatever weapons they had managed to find. Maintenance tools, kitchen knives, pieces of broken furniture. They were not soldiers. They were not warriors. But they would fight anyway. Corveth, the young Droon merchant, appeared at Salith's side. He was holding a metal pipe, his hands shaking so badly that he could barely grip it. "Commander," he said, "is the Concord fleet close? Are they almost here?" Salith looked at him. She thought about lying again, giving him one more moment of false hope. But she was tired of lying. She was tired of pretending. "No," she said softly. "No one is coming, Corveth. I am sorry. I should not have lied to you." Corveth's face crumpled. The metal pipe slipped from his hands and clattered to the floor. He looked like a child who had just learned that the monsters were real. "Then we are going to die," he whispered. "Maybe," Salith said, "or maybe we will be taken. I do not know. But I know that we will face it together. That is all I can offer you." Corveth nodded slowly. He bent down and picked up his pipe. His hands were still shaking, but his jaw was set. He was terrified, but he was not going to run. The first door fell. It crashed inward with a shower of sparks, and Ravik soldiers poured through the opening. The defenders met them with screams and fury, throwing themselves at the armored giants like waves against a cliff. Bodies fell, blood spilled, the air filled with the sounds of combat and death. Salith stood in the center of the room, watching the battle unfold. She could not fight. She had no weapon, no training, no way to help. All she could do was bear witness to the end of her people. The Ravex pushed forward, capturing defenders and civilians alike. Their neural lashes crackled with electricity, bringing down anyone who resisted. Their capture nets flew through the air, entangling victims who tried to flee. It was systematic, efficient, terrifying. And then something changed. One of the surviving technicians, a young Cathari who had been hiding near a console, suddenly shouted. His voice was high and thin, barely audible over the chaos. "Commander, the sensors! Look at the sensors!" Salith turned to the tactical display on the wall. It had been dead since the communication array was destroyed, showing nothing but static. But now somehow, it was working. Someone had managed to route power to the backup systems, to restore some small part of their eyes and ears. The display showed the space around Valora Station. The Ravex fleet was still there, 9 warships arranged in a loose formation around the crippled station. Debris from destroyed escape pods floated in the void. The battle seemed over, the outcome decided. But behind the Ravex fleet, something was happening. A subspace rupture was forming. Not the smooth, controlled kind that normal ships used, but a violent tear in reality itself. Energy poured from the rupture in chaotic waves. The fabric of space twisted and screamed. Even the Ravex ships began to turn, their sensors detecting the anomaly. Something was coming through. A ship emerged from the rupture. It was small compared to the Ravex warships, perhaps a third the size of the largest. Its hull was angular and brutal, covered in scars and patches from countless battles. Weapons bristled from every surface, crude but numerous. The ship was painted black, and across its bow, in stark white letters, were words that Salith could barely read at this distance. "We remember. A human ship. A human warship." They had come. Salith stared at the display, unable to process what she was seeing. They had come. The humans had actually come. Those 3 words that she had deleted, that she had dismissed as meaningless, had been true. "We are coming." And they had. The human ship was broadcasting something. The signal was reaching the station's damaged receivers, filtering through the emergency systems. It was not words. It was not a message. It was sound. Music. Drums that pounded like heartbeats. Instruments that screamed like rage. A voice that roared in a language Salith did not understand, but somehow recognized. Defiance. The sound of defiance. The Ravex commander, Tyrath the Hollow, was broadcasting orders to his fleet. She could not hear the words, but she could see the ships beginning to move, turning their weapons toward the lone human vessel. 9 warships against 1. The odds were impossible, but the human ship did not turn. It did not flee. It did not try to negotiate or threaten or bluff. It accelerated. The human ship was charging directly at the Ravex fleet, its engines burning so bright they looked like small suns. It was howling through the void, screaming its challenge to the predators who had thought they had no enemies. The Ravex opened fire. Weapons flashed in the darkness, a storm of energy and projectiles converging on the single target. The human ship shook under the assault, its shields flaring with each hit. But it did not stop. It kept coming, faster and faster, a black arrow aimed at the heart of the enemy fleet. And as it came, it returned fire. Salith watched as the first Ravex ship exploded. The fighting in the central core had stopped. Ravex soldiers and defenders alike stood frozen, staring at the tactical display, watching something that none of them could believe. A single ship, a single human ship, fighting an entire fleet, and winning. The human vessel cut through the Ravex formation like a blade, its weapons firing in every direction. Another Ravex ship fell, then another. Explosions lit up the void, brief flowers of fire that bloomed and died in the silent darkness. Salith felt something warm on her face. Tears. She was crying. She did not know when she had started. Corvith was beside her, his metal pipe forgotten on the floor. His eyes were wide, his mouth open. "They came," he whispered. "They actually came." "Yes," Saleth said. Her voice was barely audible. "They did." On the tactical display, the human ship continued its assault, howling through the void like something out of legend. And for the first time since the siege began, the Raveks were running. The long night was ending. The subspace rupture that brought the human ship was unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. Normal ships emerged from faster-than-light travel smoothly, sliding between dimensions like swimmers surfacing from calm water. The human vessel tore through reality like a fist through glass, leaving cracks in the fabric of space itself. Aboard the UHS Achilles, Captain Elena Vasquez gripped the arms of her command chair and watched the stars snap back into focus. Her ship was screaming around her, metal groaning under stresses it was never designed to handle. Emergency lights flashed across the bridge. Damage reports scrolled across her console in an endless stream of red text. They had pushed the engines beyond their limits to get here. They had burned through fuel reserves meant to last months. They had risked catastrophic failure with every second of the journey, and they had made it. "Status report," Vasquez said. Her voice was calm, the way still water was calm before a storm. "Shields at 60% and falling, Captain," said Lieutenant Chen, her tactical officer. He was young, barely 30, but his hands moved across his console with the speed of a veteran. "Hull integrity compromised in sections 3 and 7. We lost 2 crew members during the jump. The engines are running hot, maybe 30 minutes before we need to shut them down. Weapons? All systems operational. Railguns charged and ready. Missile tubes loaded. Point defense online." Vasquez nodded. 30 minutes. That would have to be enough. She looked at the main view screen and saw what they had come to fight. 9 Raveks warships, arranged in a loose formation around a crippled space station. The station was dark and broken, sections of its hull torn open like wounds. Debris floated around it, the remains of destroyed ships and escape pods. She could see breach pods attached to the station's skin, pumping soldiers into the corridors like venom from snake fangs. "Open a channel," Vasquez said. "All frequencies. I want everyone to hear this." Her communications officer, a woman named Rodriguez with gray streaks in her dark hair, worked her console. "Channel open, Captain." Vasquez stood up from her chair. She was 53 years old, her black hair streaked with gray, her face lined with the marks of too many battles and too little sleep. She had lost people before. She had watched friends die in the cold void of space. She had carried their memories with her like stones in her pockets, weighing her down, but also keeping her grounded. She would not let it happen again. Not if she could help it. "This is Captain Elena Vasquez of the United Human Ship Achilles," she said. Her voice carried across the void, reaching every ship, every speaker, every frightened soul on Velora Station. "To the forces of the Raveks Dominion, you have attacked a peaceful station. You have murdered innocent people. You have taken slaves. This ends now." She paused, letting the words sink in. "Release your captives. Withdraw your ships. If you do this, we will let you leave. If you do not, we will destroy you. You have 30 seconds to comply." The channel remained open. For a long moment, there was only silence. Then a new voice came through, harsh and grinding like stones against metal. It was Tyrath the Hollow, commander of the Raveks fleet, speaking from his flagship. "One ship," Tyrath said. His tone was amused, almost pitying. "You come here with one ship, little human, and you threaten me? You threaten the Raveks Dominion? You are either very brave or very stupid. I suspect you are both." 20 seconds, Vasquez said. "I have heard of your species, newcomers to the stars, children playing with toys you do not understand. You have never faced a real enemy. You have never known true war. Let me teach you. 15 seconds. I am going to destroy your ship, Captain Vasquez. Then I am going to take your crew as slaves. I will put them to work in my mines, in my factories, in my pleasure houses. And when they are broken, when they have nothing left to give, I will throw them away like the garbage they are. 10 seconds. Your species will learn to fear the Raveks. You will learn that there are predators in this galaxy, and you are prey. This is the way of things. This is the truth of the void." Vasquez smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. Time's up, she said. She cut the channel and turned to her bridge crew. They were watching her, waiting, ready. Some were afraid. All were determined. They had volunteered for this mission, knowing the odds, knowing they might not survive. They had come anyway. All hands, Vasquez said. Battle stations. Helm, take us in. Tactical, fire at will. Show these bastards what happens when they mess with humanity. The Achilles surged forward. On Velora Station, Commander Salith Vor watched the tactical display in disbelief. The human ship was not retreating. It was not circling around to find a better position. It was not trying to negotiate or stall for time. It was accelerating directly toward the center of the Ravex formation, engines burning at maximum power. "What are they doing?" whispered one of her officers. "That is suicide." Salith did not answer. She could not answer. She had never seen anything like this. The Ravex fleet opened fire. Energy beams and missiles streaked toward the lone human vessel, a storm of destruction that would have overwhelmed any ship she had ever known. The void lit up with weapons fire, bright enough to cast shadows on the station's hull. The Achilles plunged into the storm, its shields flared with each hit, rippling with energy as they absorbed the punishment. Armor plating buckled and tore. Sections of the hull vented atmosphere into space. But the ship kept coming, kept accelerating, kept pushing deeper into the enemy formation, and then it began to return fire. The Achilles carried weapons that the Ravex had never seen before. Railguns that fired solid metal projectiles at a fraction of the speed of light. Missile swarms that tracked targets with relentless precision. Point defense systems that filled the space around the ship with walls of lead and fire. The first Ravex destroyer took a railgun round directly through its engine section. The projectile punched through shields, armor, and bulkheads like they were paper, releasing a cascade of secondary explosions that tore the ship apart from the inside. It died in a bloom of fire, scattering debris across the battlefield. Salith watched, unable to breathe. The second Ravex ship tried to turn, to bring its weapons to bear on the human vessel. The Achilles was faster. A swarm of missiles left its launch tubes, corkscrewing through space in patterns that seemed almost random. The Ravex point defense systems tried to track them, tried to shoot them down, but there were too many, coming from too many directions. The missiles found their targets, slamming into the enemy ship's hull in a coordinated barrage that crippled its weapons and engines. The Achilles did not slow down to finish it. It was already moving on, already firing at the next target. On the bridge of the Ravex flagship, Tyrath the Hollow watched the battle unfold with growing disbelief. His fleet was falling apart. 2 ships destroyed, another crippled, and the human vessel was still coming, still fighting, still howling through the void like some kind of demon. "All ships, concentrate fire on the human," he ordered. "Destroy it. Destroy it now." His remaining ships obeyed, pouring everything they had at the Achilles. The human ship's shields finally collapsed under the assault, leaving only bare armor between the crew and the void. Sections of the hull were torn away, exposing corridors and compartments to the vacuum of space. Crew members died, sucked out into the darkness or killed by secondary explosions. But the ship did not stop. It kept coming, kept fighting, kept killing. A railgun round punched through another destroyer's command deck, decapitating the ship's leadership in a single strike. A missile swarm overwhelmed a cruiser's defenses, gutting its engine room and leaving it drifting helplessly. The Achilles was wounded, bleeding, dying, but it refused to fall. On the bridge of the Achilles, Captain Vasquez stood amid the chaos. Sparks flew from damaged consoles. Emergency klaxons screamed. The air was thick with smoke and the smell of burning electronics. Lieutenant Chen was shouting damage reports, his voice barely audible over the noise. "Shields down. Hull breaches in sections 1, 4, and 9. We've lost 40% of our point defense network. Engines are starting to fail." Vasquez did not flinch. "Get me a firing solution on the flagship," she said. "All remaining railguns, all remaining missiles. Everything we have. Captain, if we fire everything, we won't have anything left for defense." "We're not here to defend, Lieutenant. We're here to win." Chen hesitated for just a moment, then nodded. His hands flew across his console, coordinating the targeting data, calculating the angles and trajectories. The Achilles had been designed for exactly this kind of fight. Close range, brutal, overwhelming. Hit the enemy with everything you had before they could hit you back. It was a doctrine that other species called insane. Humans called it fury. Firing solution locked, Chen said. Fire. The Achilles unleashed everything. Railgun rounds screamed across the void. Missiles launched in waves, too many to count. The last reserves of power were drained from dying systems, converted into pure destructive force. The ship seemed to roar with the effort, its entire frame shaking with the recoil. Tyrus' flagship tried to evade. It was too slow. The first railgun rounds punched through its forward shields, shattering the protective barrier that had kept it safe. The missiles followed, swarming over the exposed hull like predators descending on wounded prey. Explosions walked across the ship's surface, each one tearing deeper into the structure. On Valora Station, Salith watched the Ravek's flagship burn. The great warship, covered in trophy bones and captured flags, was coming apart. Its engines were dark. Its weapons were silent. Fires burned in a dozen sections, visible even from this distance. Escape pods launched from its flanks, tiny figures fleeing the dying giant. "They did it," Salith whispered. "They actually did it." But the battle was not over. 5 Ravek ships remained, wounded but still functional. They had pulled back from the human vessel, forming a defensive cluster around the crippled flagship. They were not attacking anymore. They were not advancing. They were waiting. The Achilles was drifting. Its engines had finally given out, pushed beyond any reasonable limit. Its weapons were silent, ammunition expended, power reserves drained. The ship was barely alive, a broken shell held together by emergency systems and stubborn engineering. Tyrus' voice came through the communications again. It was different now, strained and angry, the arrogance stripped away. "You have cost me ships, human. You have cost me soldiers. But your ship is dying. You cannot fight anymore. Surrender now, and I will grant you a quick death. Continue to resist, and I will make your crew suffer in ways you cannot imagine." On the Achilles bridge, Vasquez listened to the offer. She looked around at her surviving crew. They were wounded, exhausted, their ship falling apart around them. They had given everything they had. It was not enough, not yet. "Rodriguez," Vasquez said, "open a channel to Valora Station, Priority 1. The communications officer nodded and worked her console. A moment later, a face appeared on the view screen. A female alien with silver-scaled skin and 4 arms, her large dark eyes wide with something that looked like wonder. "This is Commander Salith Vor of Valora Station," the alien said. "I do not know who you are, but thank you. Thank you for coming." Vasquez allowed herself a small smile. "Commander Vor, this is Captain Elena Vasquez of the Achilles. We're not done yet. Do you have any operational systems? Anything that can help us?" Salith hesitated. "Our weapons are destroyed. Our shields are gone. We have nothing left." "What about engines? Maneuvering thrusters?" "We have some. A few. They were meant for station keeping, not combat." Vasquez's smile grew wider. "That's all we need, Commander. Here's what we're going to do." She outlined her plan in quick, simple terms. It was desperate, reckless, completely insane. It required the station to do something it was never designed to do, and the Achilles to survive long enough to make it work. Salith listened, her eyes growing wider with each sentence. "That is impossible," she said when Vasquez finished. "That cannot work." "It will work," Vasquez said. "Trust me." Trust. Such a simple word. Such a heavy weight. Salith looked around the command center. Her people were watching her, waiting for her decision. Behind them, through the damaged walls, she could see the civilians huddled in the central core. 42,000 lives depending on her. She thought about what the Raveks had said, that no one fights for the weak, that no one dies for strangers, that the galaxy had abandoned them. And yet here were these humans, these primitive newcomers, throwing themselves against impossible odds for people they had never met. Maybe the Raveks were wrong. Maybe the galaxy was bigger than they knew. "Tell me what you need," Salith said. "We will do it." Vasquez nodded. "All hands," she said, her voice carrying across both ships in the station. "Prepare for the final push. We're going to show these slavers what happens when they think they're the top predators in the void." She paused, and her next words were quieter, almost gentle. "We are coming home. All of us, one way or another." The Achilles began to move again, its damaged engines sputtering to life. Velora Station fired its maneuvering thrusters, slowly rotating to align with the battlefield. The remaining Ravix ships watched, uncertain, not understanding what the humans were planning. They would understand soon enough. The final phase of the battle was about to begin, and across the void, aboard his crippled flagship, Tyrath the Hollow felt something he had not felt in centuries of raiding and conquest. He felt fear. The humans were still fighting. The humans would not stop. They had been wounded, broken, pushed to the edge of destruction, and they were still fighting. What kind of species did that? What kind of creatures threw themselves into certain death for strangers? He did not know, but he was beginning to understand that the galaxy had made a terrible mistake. They had underestimated humanity, and now humanity was howling. The humans had a name for how they fought. They called it Fury Doctrine. Other species fought with calculation, keeping their distance, measuring risk against reward. They treated war like mathematics, moving pieces on a board, sacrificing pawns to protect more valuable assets. They understood that some losses were acceptable, some targets not worth the cost. Humans did not think this way. Fury Doctrine was simple. Get close, hit hard, keep hitting until the enemy stop moving. Do not retreat, do not calculate, do not accept that some lives are worth less than others. Every soldier mattered, every civilian mattered. Everyone was worth dying for. Captain Elena Vasquez had studied the great admirals of human history. She had learned their strategies, memorized their battles, understood their victories and failures. But she had also learned something that no textbook could teach. War was not about ships or weapons or tactics. War was about will. The side that wanted it more, that was willing to sacrifice more, would win. The Ravix had ships and weapons. They had numbers and armor and technology stolen from a dozen conquered species. But they did not have the will to die for strangers. The humans did. The final phase of the battle began with a lie. The Achilles, its engines barely functional, began to drift toward the remaining Ravix fleet. Its weapons were silent, its shields were gone. It looked like a wounded animal, helpless and dying, waiting to be finished off. Tyrath saw his opportunity. The human ship had exhausted itself, destroying his forces, and now it had nothing left. He ordered his remaining 5 ships to close in, to capture the vessel and its crew. Human slaves were rare and valuable. Human soldiers, even more so. He would take them alive if he could. His ships moved forward, forming a loose ring around the drifting Achilles. They did not fire. They did not need to. The human ship was finished, and everyone knew it. What they did not know was that Velora Station was also moving. Commander Salith Vor had followed Vasquez's instructions to the letter. The station's maneuvering thrusters, designed only to maintain orbit and correct for drift, were never meant to move something so large so quickly. The engineers had warned her that the stress could tear the station apart. She had ordered them to do it anyway. Velora Station rotated slowly, like a great metal giant turning to face its tormentors. Its remaining sensor arrays, the ones that had not been destroyed in the initial attack, came online and began feeding targeting data to the Achilles. The station had no weapons, but it had something almost as good. It had eyes. On the bridge of the Achilles, Lieutenant Chen received the sensor data and smiled grimly. The station could see everything. Every Ravix ship, every piece of debris, every escape pod trying to flee. It could see through the jamming that had blinded them during the battle. It could see the weak points in the enemy formation. "Captain," he said, "we have targeting solutions on all remaining enemy ships." Vasquez nodded. "Weapon status?" "Railguns are dry, missiles expended. Point defense is running on fumes." He paused. "But we still have the boarding torpedoes." Boarding torpedoes, heavy armored capsules designed to punch through enemy hulls and deliver Marines directly into the heart of hostile ships. They were a weapon of last resort, used only when capture was more important than destruction. Today they were all the Achilles had left. "Load the torpedoes," Vasquez said. "All remaining Marines, suit up for boarding action." The order went out. And the Achilles came alive with purposeful chaos. In the armory, human Marines pulled on their powered exoskeletons. These suits were crude by galactic standards, lacking the elegant integration of more advanced species. But they were strong, tough, and reliable. They turned ordinary humans into something that could stand against the armored giants of the Ravix ground forces. Sergeant Maria Cortez checked her equipment one last time. Pulse rifle loaded, grenades secured, combat knife strapped to her thigh. She was 37 years old, a veteran of a dozen boarding actions, scarred from wounds that had nearly killed her twice. She looked around at her squad. 12 Marines, some barely out of training, others veterans like herself. They were tired, wounded, scared, but not one of them hesitated. "Listen up," Cortez said. "This is it. We're boarding the enemy flagship. Our mission is to disable their command systems, take out their leadership, and free any captives we find. Questions?" A young private named Torres raised his hand. "Sergeant, the Ravix are twice our size. Their armor can stop most of our weapons. How are we supposed to fight them?" Cortez smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. "We fight dirty, Private. We fight mean. We use the environment, explosives, numbers. We do whatever it takes to put them down. And if one of those bastards gets their hands on you, you take them with you. Understand?" Torres swallowed hard but nodded. "Good. Lock and load. We drop in 5. The boarding torpedoes launched. They screamed across the void, leaving trails of fire behind them, heading straight for Tyrith's crippled flagship. The Ravix point defense systems tried to shoot them down, but the torpedoes were small, fast, and armored. Most of them got through. They hit the flagship's hull like meteors, punching through armor plating and embedding themselves deep in the ship's structure. Hatches blew open, and human Marines poured out into enemy territory. Sergeant Cortez led her squad through a corridor filled with smoke and sparks. The Ravix flagship was damaged from the earlier battle. Fires burning in several sections, emergency systems screaming warnings in an alien language she did not understand. Good. Chaos was their friend. They encountered the first Ravix soldiers almost immediately. 2 of them, both standing nearly 3 meters tall, their chitin armor gleaming in the emergency lights. They were armed with neural lashes and plasma cleavers, weapons designed to capture and kill with equal efficiency. The Ravix saw the humans and paused. They had never fought humans before. They did not know what to expect. Cortez did not give them time to learn. "Contact front," she shouted. "Open fire!" The squad unleashed everything they had. Pulse rifles cracked, sending high-velocity rounds into the Ravix armor. Most bounced off or buried themselves in the thick chitin without penetrating. But one round found a gap, a joint between plates, and the first Ravix staggered. The second Ravix charged forward, its plasma cleaver raised high. It was fast for something so large, covering the distance in seconds. Cortez threw herself aside as the blade came down, feeling the heat of it pass centimeters from her face. Private Torres stepped up beside her. Armed with something the Ravix had never seen before, a shotgun loaded with specialized armor-piercing rounds. He pressed the barrel against the joint of the Ravix's knee and fired. The leg gave way. The giant fell. Cortez was on it instantly, her combat knife in hand. The blade was short, meant for close work, and it found the gap between helmet and neck armor with practiced precision. The Ravix thrashed, trying to throw her off, but she held on, driving the blade deeper until the alien went still. "Move!" she ordered, not stopping to celebrate. "Keep moving!" The squad pushed forward, fighting their way through the corridors of the enemy flagship. They encountered more Ravix soldiers, and each battle was brutal and costly. 2 of her Marines went down in the first hour, one killed by a neural lash. Another cut nearly in half by a plasma cleaver. But they kept moving, kept fighting, kept killing. The humans fought in ways the Ravix had never seen. They used grenades to collapse corridors, trapping enemies in dead ends. They set ambushes around corners, hitting the Ravix from multiple directions at once. When their ammunition ran low, they picked up enemy weapons and used them against their former owners. And when the fighting got close, truly close, the humans were terrifying. Cortez watched Private Torres tackle a Ravix soldier twice his size, jamming a grenade into the gap of its armor, and then rolling away just before the explosion. She saw another Marine, a woman named Chen who was unrelated to the lieutenant on the bridge, grab a neural lash from a dying enemy and use it against another Ravix. screaming in fury as she brought the giant down. These were not soldiers fighting for strategic objectives. These were people fighting for something bigger than themselves, for the captives they had come to rescue, for the station they had come to save, for the idea that no one should be left behind. On the bridge of the Achilles, Captain Vasquez monitored the boarding action while coordinating with Velora Station. The remaining Ravix ships had realized that something was wrong. They were trying to retreat, to pull back from the crippled flagship, to regroup and figure out what was happening. She could not let them. "Commander Vor," she said, "I need you to do something for me." Salith's face appeared on her screen. The alien commander looked exhausted, her silver scales dull with stress, her forearms trembling slightly. But her eyes were sharp. "What do you need? Your station still has power. You still have those maneuvering thrusters. I need you to push." Salith blinked. "Push what?" "The station. Push the station toward the enemy formation. Use it as a wall, a barrier. Trap them between your station and my ship." "That is insane. The station was not meant to move like that. The structural stress alone could—" "Commander." Vasquez's voice was gentle but firm. "I know what I'm asking. I know the risks. But if those ships escape, they will come back with reinforcements. They will finish what they started. Your people will die or be enslaved, and nothing we have done here will matter. We have to end this now." Salith was silent for a long moment. Vasquez could see her thinking, weighing the options, calculating the odds. She was a good commander, logical and careful. Those traits had kept her people alive this long, but sometimes logic was not enough. Sometimes you had to take a leap of faith. "Do it," Salith said. "All stations, maximum thrust. Push us forward." Velora Station groaned like a wounded beast as its thrusters fired at full power. The massive structure began to move, slowly at first, then faster, drifting toward the Ravix formation. The enemy ships saw it coming and tried to scatter, but they were too slow, too close. The station's bulk cut off their escape routes, forcing them into a shrinking pocket of space. On the Ravix flagship, the battle was reaching its climax. Cortez and her surviving Marines had fought their way to the command deck, losing half their number along the way. The corridor outside the bridge was littered with bodies, human and Ravix alike. 8 Marines remained, 8 against however many guards were protecting the ship's commander. "Stack up," Cortez ordered. "Grenades on 3, then we breach. Kill anything that moves." They counted down. Grenades flew. The door blew inward. The command deck of a Ravix flagship was a throne room as much as a bridge. Tyreth the Hollow sat in a massive chair at the center, surrounded by screens and consoles manned by his officers. He was enormous, even for a Ravix. His chitin armor covered in trophies and decorations from 100 conquests. His eyes, all 6 of them, burned with rage. "Humans," he snarled. "You dare!" Cortez raised her pulse rifle. "We dare!" The final fight was short and brutal. The Ravix guards were skilled, but they were not prepared for the fury of human soldiers who had nothing left to lose. Cortez took a neural lash hit to her left arm, the pain beyond anything she had ever felt, but she kept firing, kept moving, kept killing. Torres went down with a plasma burn across his chest, but he took his killer with him, driving his knife into the Ravix eye socket as he fell. In the end, only Cortez and 3 other Marines remained standing. The command deck was a charnel house, slick with blood from 2 species. The surviving Ravix officers had surrendered, throwing down their weapons and dropping to their knees. And in his throne, Tyrath the Hollow stared at the human sergeant who had just destroyed everything he had built. "What are you?" he asked. His voice was no longer arrogant or mocking. It was confused, almost afraid. Cortez limped forward, her left arm hanging useless at her side. Her armor cracked and scored from dozens of impacts. She stopped in front of the Ravix commander and looked up at him. He was twice her size, a predator who had terrorized this region of space for centuries. She was not impressed. "We are humans," she said. "We are the ones who come when no one else will. We are the ones who fight for strangers. We are the ones who die for people we have never met." She reached up and grabbed the collar of his armor, pulling him down to her level with strength that surprised them both. "And we are taking you to trial for what you have done. You are going to face justice, real justice, not revenge, not execution. Justice. Because that is what we do. That is what we are. Tyreth stared at her, and for the first time in his long life, he had no words. Outside, in the void between stars, the remaining Ravek ships were trapped between the Achilles and Velora station. They could not flee. They could not fight. One by one, they powered down their weapons and broadcast their surrender. The battle was over. Captain Vasquez slumped back in her chair, exhaustion finally catching up with her. Her ship was dying around her, fires burning in a dozen sections, hull breaches open to the void. 63 of her crew were dead, with another 100 wounded. The Achilles would never fly again. But they had won. A communication request came in from the station. Vasquez opened it. Commander Saleth's face appeared on the screen, and Vasquez saw tears running down the alien's silver scales. "Captain," Saleth said, her voice breaking. "Captain Vasquez, you saved us. You saved all of us." Vasquez smiled, though it took more effort than she wanted to admit. "That's what we're here for, Commander. That's what we do." "Why?" Saleth asked. "Why did you come? We are strangers to you. We have nothing to offer. Why would you risk everything for us?" Vasquez thought about the question. She thought about the history of humanity, all the times they had failed to help each other, all the times they had let others suffer alone. She thought about the lessons they had learned, written in blood and tears across centuries of war and peace. "Because we know what it's like to be alone," she said finally. "We know what it's like to cry for help and hear only silence. We swore that we would never let another species feel that way. Not while we draw breath. Not while we have ships to sail and soldiers to fight." She paused, her voice softening. "You are not strangers, Commander. You are people, and people deserve to be saved." Saleth could not respond. She was crying too hard. Across the void in the ruined corridors of the Ravek's flagship, Sergeant Cortez sat down against a wall and closed her eyes. Her squad was gone, most of them dead, the survivors being evacuated to the station for medical care. She was alone with the pain and the exhaustion and the memories of everyone she had lost. But they had won. They had saved the station. They had freed the captives. They had proven that humanity would stand for those who could not stand for themselves. It was worth it. It was always worth it. That was the Fury Doctrine. Not strategy, not tactics, not calculation. Just the simple truth that every life mattered, and some things were worth dying for. The battle ended in the cold glow of a dying sun. Where there had been 9 Ravek's warships, 6 now drifted as burning husks. Their hulls were torn open, their engines dark, their weapons silent forever. Debris floated around them like funeral offerings, fragments of metal and armor, and things that had once been alive. 2 ships had managed to flee into subspace during the final chaos, running back to Ravek's territory with tales of what they had seen. The last ship, Tyreth's flagship, remained intact but captured, its commander in chains. Velora Station hung in space like a wounded giant. Great sections of its hull were torn open, venting atmosphere into the void. Emergency systems flickered and failed across dozens of compartments. The station was bleeding, dying slowly, but it was not dead. The engineers were already working, sealing breaches, rerouting power, fighting to keep their home alive. And beside the station, the UHS Achilles drifted without power. The human warship had given everything it had. Its engines were cold, its weapons were empty, its shields were gone, and great holes in its hull exposed the corridors within to the vacuum of space. Emergency beacons flashed along its length, calling for help that was still many hours away. But its flag still flew. The symbol of humanity, painted on its broken hull, remained visible for all to see. Commander Saleth Vor stood at the observation window of Velora Station's command center, watching the Achilles drift. She had not slept in more than 30 hours. Her 4 arms hung limply at her sides and her silver scales had lost their luster. But she could not look away from the human ship. They had come. Against all odds, against all logic, they had come. The final count of the survivors was still being tallied, but early estimates suggested that over 31,000 souls had been saved. 31,000 people who would see their homes again, hold their families again, live their lives again. because one ship had answered a call that no one else would. The cost had been terrible. The Achilles had lost 63 crew members in the battle, with another 112 wounded. The station had lost nearly 3,000 in the initial assault and the fighting that followed. The names of the dead would be remembered, carved into monuments and spoken in prayers for generations to come. But they had won. They had survived. A shuttle launched from the crippled Achilles, crossing the short distance to Velora Station. Salith watched it approach, her heart's beating faster. She had spoken to Captain Vasquez over communications, but she had not yet met the human in person. She was not sure what to expect. The shuttle docked, and Salith made her way to the landing bay. A small crowd had gathered there, survivors who wanted to see their saviors with their own eyes. They parted for her as she approached, whispering among themselves. The shuttle's hatch opened, and Captain Elena Vasquez stepped out. She was smaller than Salith had expected. Humans were known to be a diminutive species, but seeing it in person was different. Vasquez was perhaps a third of Salith's height, with soft skin and only 2 arms. Her hair was black streaked with gray, and her face was lined with age and exhaustion. She wore a uniform that had seen better days, stained with smoke and blood and the grime of battle. She looked like she could barely stand, but her eyes were bright and sharp, and she held herself with the dignity of someone who knew exactly who she was. Salith stepped forward and bowed, a gesture of deep respect among the Veloxi. "Captain Vasquez," she said, "I am Commander Salith Vor. On behalf of everyone aboard this station, every life you have saved, I thank you. Words are not enough, but they are all I have." Vasquez returned the bow, or tried to. Her movements were stiff, and Salith could see her wince with pain. The human was wounded, perhaps more seriously than she was showing. "Commander Vor," Vasquez said, "I'm glad we made it in time. I'm sorry we couldn't do more." "Do more?" Salith was shocked. "You have done more than anyone else in the galaxy was willing to do. You came when everyone else refused. You fought against impossible odds. You saved us." Vasquez shook her head slowly. "We lost people, good people, and we couldn't save everyone on your station. That's going to stay with me for a long time." Salith did not know how to respond to that. In her experience, military commanders celebrated victories and moved on from defeats. They did not dwell on the lives they could not save. But Vasquez seemed genuinely troubled, genuinely sorrowful. "Come," Salith said, gesturing toward the interior of the station. "You need rest, medical attention. We have quarters prepared for you and your crew." "Thank you, but I'd like to see the situation first. How many wounded? How much damage? What do you need from us?" "Captain, you have done enough, more than enough." Vasquez's eyes met hers, and Salith saw something in them that she did not fully understand. It was not pride or arrogance. It was not the cold calculation of a soldier who had done their job. It was something softer, something that seemed almost painful. "Commander," Vasquez said quietly, "my ship is dying. Most of my crew is injured. We pushed our engines so hard getting here that they'll never work again. We knew that when we left. We knew we might not make it back." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "We didn't come here to do enough. We came here because it was the right thing to do. And we're not going to stop helping until every person on this station is safe. That's not negotiable." Salith stared at her for a long moment. Then slowly she nodded. "Very well, Captain. Come with me. I will show you what we need." They walked through the damaged corridors of the station together, the tall alien commander and the small human captain. Everywhere they went, survivors stopped to stare, to whisper, to reach out and touch Vasquez as if to confirm that she was real. The human accepted their attention with grace, stopping to speak with children, to comfort the wounded, to simply be present with people who had thought they were going to die. They reached a large common area that had been converted into a makeshift medical ward. Hundreds of wounded lay on cots and blankets, tended by exhausted Veloxi healers. The air smelled of blood and disinfectant and fear. Salith saw Vasquez's face harden as she took in the scene. "How many?" the human asked. "Nearly 4,000 wounded, last count. We do not have enough medicine or equipment to treat them all. Many will die before help arrives." Vasquez was silent for a moment. Then she turned to one of her officers, a woman who had followed them from the shuttle. Rodriguez, contact the Achilles. I want every medical supply we have transferred to this station immediately. Strip the ship if you have to. These people need it more than we do. Captain, our own wounded. We'll share what we have with the people here. That's an order. Rodriguez nodded and moved away to carry out the command. Saleth watched, surprised. You would give away your own supplies? Your people need them too. Vasquez shrugged. We have each other. That's more than most. Besides, we didn't come all this way to let people die because of a shortage of bandages. They continued through the ward, Vasquez stopping frequently to check on patients, both human and alien. She had no medical training that Saleth could see, but she had a way of speaking to the wounded that seemed to ease their pain. She held hands. She listened to stories. She simply sat with those who needed company. At one bed they found Corveth, the young Droon merchant who had asked Saleth if help was coming. He was lying on a cot, his left arm wrapped in bandages, his gray skin pale from blood loss. He had been injured in the fighting, caught by a Ravex neural lash that had nearly killed him. When he saw Saleth, he tried to sit up. Commander, he said, his voice weak, you came back. Of course I came back. How are you feeling? I'll live. The healers say I was lucky. He looked past Saleth and saw Vasquez. His eyes widened. Is that one of them? One of the humans? Vasquez stepped forward and knelt beside his bed, bringing herself to his eye level. I'm Captain Vasquez, she said. I heard you fought well, held the line when things got bad. Corveth looked embarrassed. I didn't do much. I had a metal pipe. I was scared. Being scared and fighting anyway is called courage. I've seen soldiers with decades of training break under less pressure than what you faced. You should be proud. The young Droon was silent for a moment, processing her words. Then he asked the question that Saleth had asked, the question that seemed to be on everyone's mind. Why did you come? Why did you help us? We're nobody. We don't matter. Vasquez reached out and took his hand, her small fingers wrapping around his larger gray ones. Everyone matters, she said. Every life has value. That's what we believe. That's why we came. But you lost people. Your soldiers died for us, strangers. Yes, and they died doing what they believed in. They died saving lives. There's no better death than that. Corveth started to cry. He did not try to hide it. The tears ran down his gray cheeks, and his body shook with sobs that he had been holding in for hours. Vasquez did not let go of his hand. She stayed with him until the tears stopped. Later, Saleth led Vasquez to a private room that had been prepared for her. It was small and simple, but it was clean and safe. A pot of something hot sat on a small table. Coffee, Saleth had been told. A human drink. One of the surviving galley workers had managed to find some in a damaged storage area. Vasquez sat down heavily, and for the first time, Saleth saw her let her guard down. The exhaustion was written in every line of her face, the weight of everything she had done, everyone she had lost, pressed down on her shoulders. You should rest, Saleth said. I will, soon. Vasquez picked up the coffee and took a small sip. A faint smile crossed her face. This is terrible coffee. I apologize, we are not experienced with human beverages. No, it's perfect. Thank you. They sat in silence for a while. The alien commander and the human captain, two strangers who had been thrown together by fate and violence. Somewhere in the distance, repairs continued. Life continued. The station was healing, slowly, one piece at a time. Finally, Saleth asked the question that had been burning in her mind since the battle ended. Captain, may I ask you something? Of course. When you came through that subspace rupture, you were broadcasting music. War music, I am told. Why? Vasquez's smile grew a little wider, though there was sadness in it. It's tradition, an old human tradition. When we go into battle, we want our enemies to know we're coming. We want them to hear us. We want them to feel us. To frighten them? Partly, but it's more than that. She paused, gathering her thoughts. Music is how we express things that words can't capture. Joy, sorrow, rage, love. When we go to war, we take our music with us because it reminds us of what we're fighting for. It keeps us connected to who we are. She looked at Salith with eyes that had seen too much death and too much life. That song we were playing, it's called a battle hymn. It's hundreds of years old. Our ancestors sang it when they went to fight for freedom, when they went to fight against tyranny, when they went to fight for people who couldn't fight for themselves. What does it mean? The words? Vasquez was quiet for a moment. Then she translated, her voice soft. It means we will not break, we will not bend. We will stand against the darkness, no matter the cost. We will fight for the light. Salith felt tears forming in her eyes. That is beautiful. It's who we are. It's who we try to be. Vasquez set down her coffee cup. We're not perfect, Commander. Humans have done terrible things to each other throughout our history. We fought wars over land, over resources, over ideas. We've caused more suffering than I can describe. Then why do you help others now? Because we learned. It took us a long time, and we made a lot of mistakes, but we learned. We learned that the universe is vast and cold and doesn't care about any of us. We learned that the only warmth in the darkness is what we create ourselves. We learned that if we don't stand up for each other, no one will. She leaned forward, her eyes intense. When we first reached the stars, we thought we were alone. Then we discovered other species, other civilizations, and we saw how the galaxy worked. We saw the strong prey on the weak. We saw empires built on slavery and conquest. We saw the same patterns that had plagued our own history. And you decided to change it? We decided to try. We can't save everyone. We can't fix everything. But we can be there when people need us. We can answer the calls that no one else will. We can show the galaxy that there's another way to live. Salith was silent, absorbing her words. The Ravex will come back, she said finally. They will want revenge. Probably, and when they do, we'll be ready. We're already building more ships, training more soldiers, and next time, we won't come alone. What do you mean? Vasquez smiled, and this time there was genuine warmth in it. Word spreads, Commander. What happened here today will be known across 100 worlds by tomorrow. Species who thought they were alone will learn that someone came for Valora Station. Someone fought for strangers. Someone proved that the void doesn't have to be cold and empty. She stood up, moving toward the small window that looked out at the stars. We're going to build something new, an alliance, a promise, a declaration that no one gets left behind. It won't happen overnight, and it won't be easy, but it will happen. Because once people know that help exists, they'll start believing in it, and belief is the first step toward change. Salith rose and stood beside her, looking out at the same stars. You truly believe this? I have to. It's the only thing that makes sense. A communication chirped on Vasquez's wrist device. She answered it. Captain, this is Rodriguez. The relief fleet from the Concord just dropped out of subspace. They're offering assistance. Vasquez's expression flickered with something between amusement and cynicism. 11 cycles late, but at least they showed up. Tell them we appreciate the help. The station has a lot of wounded. Will do. Also, Captain, we're getting communication requests from about 30 different species. They all want to know about what happened here. News services, governments, civilian groups. Everyone wants the story. Let them wait. The story isn't finished yet. Understood. Rodriguez out. The channel closed and Vasquez turned back to Salith. It seems your station has become famous, Commander. Salith shook her head slowly. It is not the station that will be famous. It is the ship, and your crew. We didn't do it alone. Your people fought too. They held the line when everything seemed lost. They made it possible for us to make a difference. But you came. That is what everyone will remember. You came when no one else would. Vasquez was quiet for a moment. Then she reached out and took Salith's upper right hand, a gesture of connection between two very different species. We will always come, she said. That's my promise, not just mine. Humanity's promise. Whenever someone calls for help, whenever someone cries out in the darkness, we will answer. We will come. Salith squeezed her hand back. I believe you. One galactic cycle later, the tale of the Achilles had spread across 100 worlds. The Ravex Dominion's raids had slowed dramatically. Rumors said they now sent scouts ahead to check for human vessels, before attacking any target. The predators had learned that there was something in the void more dangerous than them. The Galactic Concord, embarrassed by their failure to respond in time, had opened formal diplomatic relations with humanity. Trade agreements were being negotiated. Military cooperation was being discussed. The humans, once dismissed as primitive newcomers, were now treated with respect and perhaps a little fear. On Valora Station, repairs were nearly complete. The scars of the battle remained, visible in patched hull sections and replaced systems, but life had returned. The markets were busy again. Children played in the recreation areas. The healers tended to the sick and injured, as they always had. A memorial had been built in the central plaza. It listed the names of everyone who had died in the siege, both defenders and rescuers. Human names sat beside Veloxi names, Droon names, Cathari names. In death, as in battle, they were equal. At the top of the memorial, carved in letters that would last for centuries, were the words that had become a symbol of hope across the galaxy. We remember. And beneath them, 3 more words that carried even more weight. We are coming. Commander Salith Vor visited the memorial every day. She stood before the names of her people, the ones she had lost, and she remembered. But she also looked at the human names, the strangers who had died for her world, and she felt something she had not expected to feel. Gratitude, pride, hope. The galaxy was still vast and cold. Predators still lurked in the darkness. The void did not care about life or suffering or dreams. But somewhere out there, humans were watching. Humans were building. Humans were preparing. And if anyone ever called for help again, the humans would answer. They would come howling through the void, carrying their music and their fury and their stubborn belief that every life mattered. That was their promise. That was their nature. That was what made them human. And the galaxy would never be the same.